If you don't sign this contract extension right now, I'm going to hold my breath until I faint.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever the podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. Now, and damn, it feels good to say that. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the app today. And like I alluded to, unreasonable, petulant children throw their little fits, right? And they get mad and they get angry. And that's what happens, right? And so I feel the need to talk about this because it's so silly and nonsensical that it needs to be brought up. The Ole Miss fan base has turned against Lane Kiffin, right? That's what happened. The Ole Miss fan base, despite on Saturday night after beating Florida, going, "We want Lane, we want Lane, we want Lane," they are now turning their backs on Lane Kiffin. And why would that happen, right? Why would that happen to such a prestigious program? Why? I don't get it. Sure, it's been 65 years since they've been in a championship or won a championship, but no. They're trust me, they're a prestigious program that everyone cares about. The hell out of here. No one cares. What happened was Lane Kiffin is the hottest name in coaching right now, right? And that means that every time a big job opens, that big job is going to come knocking for Lane Kiffin. That's what happens. Congratulations. Like, that's what happens when you nail the hire. And because there's a two-pronged approach to this. That's what happens when you, one, nail the hire, which Ole Miss did by hiring Lane Kiffin. And two, that's what happens when you nail the hire and you're a second-rate program like Ole Miss is. That there's no other way to put it, right? There's no other way to put it. That's it. You're a second-rate program. Congratulations. You nailed the coaching hire. And now that it's potentially going against you, you want to throw a little fit. Why is it going against you, right? What happened? It was all good just a week ago, right? Guess not. Ole Miss reportedly gave Lane Kiffin an ultimatum, which is a much better Netflix concept than it is anything else. Ultimatums don't work, right? They just don't. That's my belief of them. I don't think ultimatums work because if I have to force you into making a decision, one, might not be the right decision. Two, it's probably not a decision. Like you're not gonna have a good feeling about that decision if you were forced to make it. Because on your timeline, if you make that decision and you feel like it's the right decision, then it is what it is. If you go on my timeline and I say, hey, you need to make this decision by this date, if that doesn't work with you, that doesn't work with you. So look, I get it, right? You know, I get wanting the answer. But here's the thing. You hired Lane Kiffin and you didn't think at some point it was going to get staticky? You didn't think that at any point? At no point were you like, hey, hiring this guy who's always been a lightning rod of attention, at some point that's going to come back, right? Now, why would you think that? Why would that happen to you? Why would that happen to the great, mighty Ole Miss Rebels? But that is what happened, right? You hired a great coach, or actually, you hired a good coach who became more serious and ended up becoming a great, potentially even elite coach, right? That's what happened. Won a lot of games. You're in back-to-back, maybe the best 2-year stretch in program history for Ole Miss, right? That's what you got, which is saying a lot, right? Saying a lot. But he got interest from Florida and LSU, and every job that opened went, what about Lane? Right? Can we get Lane? Like every job that did that. Now that you've got that attention, that you've got that going, you gave Lane an ultimatum. And I just don't get where Ole Miss fans feel Lane's the bad guy here. I don't get it. Like I understand saying, hey, we don't like that he's interested in other jobs or that he's listening to other jobs during the season, but I don't know, like Lane was still winning football games, right? Ole Miss was still winning football games. He was handling a bunch of things, not directly. Ole Miss screwed it up for themselves, right? And look, Ole Miss did this so that they can paint him as the villain. I'm not saying he's the victim, right? I'm not saying that Lane Kiffin's a victim in this, but to paint him as the villain is nonsensical, right? And look, I'll pull the curtain back here. We had a big conversation about it in the Locked On SEC text thread, like the group chat yesterday. And there were some people that were like, "Oh, well, entertaining the job is not a good thing, right? How do you expect players to commit if you're not committed?" Here's the thing. I understand that thought process. But it wasn't messy 2 weeks ago. This wasn't messy 2 weeks ago. This was, like Lane's doing whatever he's doing. They're still playing. They're still winning. We're good with it. Florida's doing what they're doing. They're still playing. They're not winning. They're good with it. LSU's doing what they're still doing. They're playing. They're good with it. Like everybody was good, right? Like I said 5 minutes ago, it was all good just a week ago, right? Because nobody was talking about how messy this was, right? It was Ole Miss fans going, "We're such a good program that he wouldn't want to leave us for you." It was Ole Miss fans going, "You're stupid. He would leave what he's built in Oxford, Mississippi." That's what it was. And it was Florida fans going, "You're not on our level." It was LSU fans going, "You're not on our level." Because guess what, Ole Miss? You're not. It's as simple as that. You're not on Florida's level. You're not on LSU's level. And you probably never will be because you just had a great coach, or you currently have a great coach, and you guys are the ones that are potentially running him off, right? That's what it was. This whole time, I've been saying, I don't know if Lane will leave. I really don't. Because I was like, oh, well, Lane is building a legacy at Ole Miss. Because he is. He could have stayed at Ole Miss and been the greatest head coach Ole Miss has ever had. He could have gone to Florida or LSU and gone to chase a championship. He could have done all those things. But he was doing it on his timeline. And I'm fine with that, right? I will, if you're new here, maybe you don't know this, but if you've been here for a while, you know that with coaches and with recruits, I am perfectly fine with you taking your time and you moving on the timeline that's best for you. Because really what you're doing is deciding your future. I get it. As Florida, when a recruit's, I don't know, I'm not gonna speed up my recruitment. I'm not gonna do this. Cool. I'm fine with that. I know there's people that aren't. I'm fine with it. Same thing with a coach. You don't got to speed up your process for us. Florida administration might handle that differently. Sure, absolutely. I'm not saying that they wouldn't. I'm not saying Florida wouldn't do the same thing. I don't think they would. But I do think that, coaches should take their time. Players should take their time. They had their team meeting, right, that they had to have because it was such a distraction. They had that. What happened is Ole Miss got impatient, and Ole Miss gave an ultimatum to a guy who is widely thought of as a bit of an egomaniac, right? You give an ultimatum to an egomaniac, I would say that I think the least likely option now is Lane staying at Ole Miss. And there is nobody to blame for that other than Ole Miss. Again, I will stand firm and I will stand in the pain here. I feel good about Florida landing Lane Kiffin, but I don't think Lane has officially made a decision yet. I don't think he's told anybody a decision because I don't think it's been made. But I do think that Ole Miss just helped him get closer to making one, not in the way they wanted to. You played stupid games, and now you might win a stupid prize, which makes a lot of sense because if you've seen anything about how the Ole Miss fan base talks and how they tweet and what they say and how they spell, they're stupid. So yeah, they're going to play stupid games, win stupid prizes, because that's what stupid does, right? You can't fix stupid. Remember that. We're going to talk more about this Ole Miss nonsense from a second-rate program that they are when we get back with Locked On Gators. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I will take this moment to publicly thank the Chicago Bulls and the Utah Jazz for going into double overtime on Sunday night. I had Vucevic. I had 2 threes, 3 threes, 4 threes, all parlayed with Michael Porter Jr.'s threes. And Michael Porter Jr. did his part early in the game, or early in the day. Vucevic, double overtime, did his part. So thank you very much for that. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, whether it's the podcast and on YouTube. I am Brandon Olsen. You could tell, or I think you could tell by my voice, that I'm sick right now. I'm not as sick as the Ole Miss fan base is, because, oh my goodness, they have no idea what to do, right? Act like you've been here before, right? You know, we heard this whole season, or half the season, since Billy Napier was pretty much definitely getting fired, right? We heard Ole Miss fans go, you can't get Lane. You can't have Lane. Lane's not going to leave a playoff team. Lane's not going to leave a playoff team. He's not going to do it. Lane's not leaving. Lane wouldn't do that to us. And here's the thing. To this date, still, November 18th, 2025, he hasn't, right? But you just made it a hell of a lot more likely that he does. So, which I thank you for, because you're stupid, and so I thank you for that. But this nonsensical confidence that Ole Miss fans had, what happened the moment things got rough? You got rattled and you folded. Folded. All because of you. And like this whole like, oh, Lane's the villain thing makes no sense. Because what did Lane do? He entertained a job. Yes. But again, if you are working at a second-rate program and a first-rate program comes up, you're not going to listen. Think about you and your job. If you're an Ole Miss fan watching this, which I know you are, I know you guys can't type, but maybe voice to text. Maybe that'll help you. We know you can't spell. Tell me, if you're working your job and whatever field you're in, a much bigger, much better company comes calling, you're not going to listen? You're not going to listen? Let me tell. Are you going to tell your boss right away and go, hey, this is what I'm doing right now? Or are you going to keep doing your job, see how the process goes, and if you get the formal offer, then maybe you take it, maybe you don't, right? To me, that's what Lane Kiffin's done. Reports on Sunday, his family visited Gainesville to look around. Okay. Reports on Monday, his family visited Baton Rouge to look around. Okay. Did he? I didn't see that in the reports, right? I'll say this. I don't think that he's deciding where he's going based on these visits, right? He's probably, from what I've been told, the more likely outcome is that if they go and they don't like the city, town, location, whatever you want to say, would cross them off the list. Not that they're making the decision of where they are going, but maybe where they're not going. More reasonable, I think. But instead now, Ole Miss did this thing, which, by the way, like, again, to pull the curtain back, we were talking about this in the SEC group chat, and I was like, can someone just tell me what Lane did to make this messy? And the responses I got were, Ole Miss told him to make a decision by the Egg Bowl. He didn't make it messy then. That's nothing he did. And even if he did react off of that, I blame the team giving him the ultimatum, right? He sent his family to go on these visits. He didn't, right? They went. Like I think this is about as passive as a coaching candidate has handled being sought after. Yeah, he's got his people checking things out for him so that he can keep going and winning games for Ole Miss. I'm gonna pull up the Stephen Willis tweet from Locked On Ole Miss, who a lot of you guys know at this point. I did not have a coach quitting on his team right before a title run on my bingo card. Interesting. He said, I did not have a coach quitting on his team right before a title run on my bingo card. Clearly referring to Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss. And my response was, I quote tweeted it, and I said, the spin is in. Ole Miss tried to rush the decision with an ultimatum, and it isn't going their way, so now Lane's the bad guy. Because that's what happened. Like, never forget, Lane might not have handled everything perfectly. I'm not saying he's the victim. I'm not saying he's without any blame. What I am saying is that Lane didn't make this messy, right? Lane's part of the mess. I don't deny that. I don't dispute that. I don't dispute that at all. Lane's part of the mess. And the mess is because of Lane, right? In a way, it's because you had this great coach and everybody wants him. But what did he do to create this mess? Nothing. He was successful. That's it. That's all it was. He was incredibly successful at a second-rate program. And when you're incredibly successful at a second-rate program, other schools come calling. Other jobs come calling. Because they go, man, imagine what you could do if you're not at a second-rate program. And that's all it is. Like Lane's biggest issue that he had, biggest flaw that he had, was that he was successful at Ole Miss. That's it. And instead of Ole Miss fans going, oh, like that was a great hire, ton of success, most success we've had in a long time. Let's take that buyout money and find someone new and run this thing back. No, you went, we're going to, like I said earlier, I will, if you don't sign this contract extension, I will hold my breath until I faint. That's what we're doing. No, I'm sorry. Like, I'm not trying to be like a Lane apologist at all. Like, if he is the hire at Florida, I will give him a ton of critique. I'll critique everybody. You guys know how it is. He's not without flaw. Does he have a big ego? Absolutely. Absolutely. Do I care about it? Not really. I think every coach has a big ego, right? I think that you need a big ego to be a great coach. So I'm fine with it. I really don't care. Like that doesn't matter to me. All of Lane's flaws that he has, with play calling, fourth down, all that stuff, like, I'm good with it. He wants to take his time making a decision. I'm fine with it. Hell, I sat out here, 3 weeks ago, and I was like, yeah, take your time. It's going to be probably 6 weeks, 7 weeks before we get an answer. Don't worry about it. It's going to be a long process. Be patient. Ole Miss administration, maybe you should have taken my word. It's going to be a long process. Be patient. But now that you weren't patient, now that you screwed it up for yourself, now that you're in a spot you don't want to be in, you're trying to paint him as the bad guy. Here's the thing. I'm going to throw this out there. Unless it's something deadly serious, like if we're talking like someone needs some kind of like intervention or something, right? If you're giving an ultimatum, I don't think you're usually the good guy. I'll say that's how I feel about ultimatums, right? Like I don't think giving someone an ultimatum, again, unless it's like a dire situation, I don't think giving someone an ultimatum is like, I don't think that's something that great people do often, right? You gave the ultimatum. Here's the thing. You didn't even get told no. You didn't. You gave an ultimatum that said, hey, speed up your process. And he went, okay, I'm going to send my family places. I'm going to do this. I'm going to speed up my process. And then he sped up the process and you threw a fit. You morons. You grade A idiots. You did it to yourselves. You did it to yourselves. And I hope you hire someone that goes 0-12 for the next 4 years. because you are morons in every sense of the word for that nonsense that you tried to pull and then it didn't go your favor and you want to paint someone else as the bad guy. Paint a clown face on your face because that's all you are. Clowns. Oh my God. That's just, I don't get it. The whole ultimatum thing just to throw a fit immediately after is hysterical to me. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes, be a stupid university, have a stupid fan base. You're knocking it all out the park, Ole Miss. We're going to talk about who the candidates might be for Florida if it's not Lane Kiffin when we get back with Locked On Gators. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free to listen to the podcast and on YouTube. And to wrap up today's show, we're talking about who might be secondary candidates for Florida, right? And some of that does stem from things, right? James Franklin got hired by Virginia Tech yesterday. And if you watched, I think it was maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit less than that. No, it had to be about 2 weeks ago. If you watch 2 weeks ago, we had a bonus show come out. It was myself, Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football, and Zach Sako of Locked On Nittany Lions. And we had the conversation about James Franklin, right? And we mentioned James Franklin, Virginia Tech. And Zach Sako, again, host of Locked On Nittany Lions, he's the Penn State guy. He said, James Franklin doesn't want to go to the ACC if he doesn't have to go to the ACC. He's at Virginia Tech, which tells you, hey, he has to go to the ACC, right? Then why did he have to go to the ACC? We know that he was someone that Florida vetted. We know he was someone that was on Florida's list generally. Why did he give that up? Probably because he's no longer on Florida's list. That's all I can think of, right? I can't think of Virginia Tech being the one that's like, oh, we got to speed this process up. Can't do it. So Virginia Tech gets James Franklin. Great hire for them, by the way. You know, Zach Sako mentioned that he's recruited the DMV very well. Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and I know people have always gotten like, whenever I've said DMV here regionally, people are like, well, DMV. That's what it is, that little area. But who else could be candidates? Well, Eli Drinkwitz is a name that's often floated. I will say this. Eli doesn't seem to me like the kind of guy that is cool not being your top candidate, right? Like Eli's got an ego. I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. Little man complex, whatever people want to call it. Which I'm not saying I agree. I'm just saying that's what I've been told. And I've said before, like I think he's an a-hole. No problem saying that. Said it before, met him in person. This is one of the few coaches I could say, hey, in my personal experience talking to him, that's my thoughts of him. He wins games. I'll give him that. But, and if I'm not mistaken, if this hasn't changed, they haven't lost to an unranked opponent in like 3 years. All their losses have been ranked opponents. So there's that. Not exactly inspiring. I do think that he'll rub people the wrong way at times. And I would also be very curious to see what his staff would look like because he started winning at Missouri once he gave up play calling duties. And his offensive coordinator is Kirby Moore. So Kellen Moore, head coach of the Saints, Kellen Moore's little brother. I don't know if Kirby would get the head coaching job in Missouri, if he would go to an OC job somewhere else or take a G5 head coaching job maybe. But I don't know what would happen there. But I don't know if Kellen Moore or if Kirby Moore would follow Drink to a Florida, for example. Got to get that hire right. He's gotten DC hire right just about every time he's made one. So there's that. But OC, going to be interesting. I've said Sean Gleason would be the guy I think of, the QB coach at Missouri, because, well, he knows the system, knows the quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are usually the guy that you want calling those plays there. So Sean Gleason. Brent Key from Georgia Tech. And I will include Jeff Brohm here from Louisville. I think that both of them are tremendous coaches. They would both be very high on my list, frankly. But they both have a thing where I go, I don't know if they would come here, which isn't to say, oh, yeah, Florida's not a good job. But And I've said this before, like when we talk about guys with alma maters, especially, some guys, it just means a lot to them. Like Jeff Brohm, he gets to go, well, Louisville was really good when I was here. They're really good now that I'm here. It means a lot to me to win here. Brent Key said, cut me open, see what colors I bleed. I've never heard a coach invite you to cut him open so that you can see what colors he bleeds. Brent Key did that. I don't know if they'd leave. And look, that could also just be alma mater, I'm staying here, coach talk, right? It could be. He could say that. The next year job opens up that does offer him, which, by the way, I'm not saying Florida has, but that does offer him. And he goes. Entirely possible. Jeff Brohm, the reports are that he'd be interested in the Florida job, or that he would be willing to talk about the Florida job. Everybody would be. I said this on Twitter. I've said this on the show before. Everybody would be interested in hearing from Florida about the Florida job, even if you have no interest in taking the Florida job, because you then get to turn back to your program and say, hey, Florida's coming knocking. You want to give me an extension? Cool. And that's what you could do. So there's that. And Jedd Fisch is the last name, right? Jedd Fisch from Washington, Florida alum, and has found success everywhere he's gone. He wins everywhere he's gone. You know, he's not exactly like a Curt Cignetti type of winner, but he wins everywhere he goes. Has his concerns though of I don't know how longevity would work, because he doesn't usually stay in places for long terms. And also I think that the NFL would come calling at some point, and I think he'd go to the NFL. So I'd say that for Jedd Fisch, but they'd all be great coaches, great candidates. Actually, I don't know if it actually happens. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free with us in the podcast and on YouTube. We will be back tomorrow at the absolute latest to talk more Florida Gators football. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work about the Florida Gators with swampsignal.substack.com. I will see you all next time.